Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. Welcome to our presentation on how to gain an edge in the competitive talent market. Today, our panel of experts will address important questions on applicant flow, candidate experience, diversity, and more. This is a very special presentation because we're joined by our partners at TalentReef, the leading provider of HR software for the service industry's hourly workforce. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your moderator during this hour. If you want to get in touch with me about future webinar topics, Outmatch-specific information, or if you'd like to speak with one of our many talent experts, feel free to reach out to me directly at csummers@outmatch.com or just chat in your comments. Outmatch is a talent analytics organization providing predictive assessments, culture analytics, and leadership solutions through the #1 talent analytics platform on the market. Our experts can dive into your initiatives, provide solutions, and show you what kind of results to expect. We have a lot of exciting things on a roadmap around culture and leadership, and we recently launched a brand new, highly engaging assessment that candidates love. If you're interested, join us this Friday as we reveal the industry's first truly predictive and candidate-friendly image-based assessment. I'll provide the link in the chat box right now. It will also be included in the follow-up email tomorrow, so just give me one moment to put that into the chat box right now. All right, just put it in there. As a thank you for joining us today, all attendees will receive a free copy of our popular infographic, 5 ways to optimize your candidate experience using data, which provides benchmarks and best practices for increasing candidate flow and reducing drop-off. I actually also put that as a handout. So if you go over to your status bar, in handouts, you can actually see that there along with the slides from today's presentation. If you'd like the recording from today's presentation, please email me at csummers@outmatch.com, or you can go to outmatch.com/webinars to find all of our on-demand and upcoming webinars. As I mentioned, we're presenting today's webinar with our partners at TalentReef, so please take a moment to follow us on all the socials at Outmatch HCM and at TalentReef. You can also interact with us using the questions queue in your GoToWebinar status window. Please feel free to ask questions, make comments, or share feedback at any point during the webcast. You can also ask questions or leave comments on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Now I'd like to introduce the 3 expert panelists that will be taking part in our candidate experience discussion today. First, we have Tim Thomas, who we'll refer to today as Outmatch Tim. He is a client success partner at Outmatch. He works closely with clients to build strong partnerships, share best practices, ensure that clients are achieving their desired results. Tim has a great deal of experience supporting clients, especially in the super tight talent market we find ourselves in today. We also have Cheryl from Outmatch, who has spent the last 10 years in the talent management space, as both an internal expert and an external consultant. She currently works as a talent strategy partner, helping clients to design and implement selection-based assessment initiatives to support their overall talent acquisition strategy. And finally, we have Tim Leonard, who we'll refer to today as TalentReef Tim. He is the Chief Product Officer at TalentReef. Tim is a proven software visionary and entrepreneur with 25 years of SaaS experience in the HR, recruiting, and talent management space. Tim founded TalentReef in 2009, and today he's focused on leading the company's product management, development, and innovation. Before we dive in, I'd like to set the stage for our discussion today. According to a people management report from earlier this year, which surveyed over 600 HR executives, recruiting and talent acquisition and diversity and inclusion came in at #1 and #3 on the HR's priority list. We saw a trend in leaders saying things like, "We are competing for talent in a very competitive industry where unemployment rates are extremely low." And everyone in our industry is talking about diversity, but the numbers aren't moving. These are the topics that we'll focus on today. So I'd like to start off with a quick poll. This will help our panelists better understand all of you on the call and what you're most interested in learning about today. So I'll go ahead and launch that right now. Give me one moment. Okay, so you should be able to see it on your screens now. Go ahead and pick as many options that apply to you. We'll give you about 30 seconds to respond here. So our question here is, how have you responded to low employment and high competition for talent? We've got 5 answers here. Shortening our application process, adding more recruiter touch points, investing in sourcing recruitment brand, no changes, that's why I'm here, and or something else. And go ahead and leave your comments in the status window, and we can take a look at those. About 15 seconds here. Cool. So I'll go ahead and close that poll. And I'll quick share it with you. So it does look like we have, a pretty close tie on those top 3. So shortening application process, definitely an important item there to do. Adding more recruiter touch points, came at 47% of you said that you're doing that. Investing in sourcing recruitment brand, 39%. And no changes yet. That's why I'm here. So we will definitely have some good insights coming from some experts here. So and something else. So again, please share those in the comments, and we'll get to those later on. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So we'll go ahead and get started with our first panel question here. What changes should companies be making to stay competitive? And Outmatch, Tim, I'm actually going to, based on your experience, I'm going to actually throw this one right to you to start. So Tim, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. And once again, good morning, good afternoon, and glad to be on here with my fellow panelists. So really exciting topic that internally we at Outmatch we've been really discussing over the past year, right? So, the tight labor market is something that organizations across the board have been facing as a challenge, right? So one of the things that's crucial is to be able to really market yourself as an organization to candidates, really to stand out among all the choices they have. Some interesting research that kind of ties into all of this that I read recently. It's almost half of new hires said they were offered a job in less than 2 weeks after beginning the application process, just showing that there's a lot of options out there, right? And almost all newly hired employees, about 91%, said, as part of the research, said the interview process influenced their general opinion of an employer. And those are things that we know that, right? So being able to influence their perception is very key, even upfront before the interview process. And it really boils down to that, especially with the current challenge. So first of all, what is the candidate's perception about your brand as an organization as they go through the application process? So a good thing to think about, right? Are they excited to apply for a job? What does their whole experience of applying comprise of? Is it cumbersome? Is it smooth? Is it easy? Is it a fun experience actually going through the job? Will that candidate say that after they complete the applications? How are the questions being asked? And here, an important one here, how long is it taking to complete the whole application process? And it's interesting to see the poll, and that's very telling, right? Because that was a big one as far as really making the application process smooth and easy for the candidate. And like I'd mentioned earlier, that's really what we've been thinking about as we look at the industry, as we see trends and really planning the way our product is positioned, right? We recently came out, Charles mentioned this, we recently came out with Outmatch 2.0 from an assessment perspective, where now candidates see visual assessments. Not only are we able to help candidates have a fun experience going through taking the assessments, it really impacts the time to complete, which is a lot more shorter and really engaging when the candidate goes through it.
Yep. And I agree with that, Tim. And a lot of the conversations that I'm having with clients and just from internal experience as well, the application piece is huge when you think about how long it's taking to fill out an application. Sometimes resume parsing doesn't always work as perfectly as we want it to. But when we have applications that are really targeted around the questions that are most pertinent to the job or to the organization, rather than just a litany of fields, is really helpful for us. And what we see in the research, that the shorter the application, the better. But we're also wanting to make sure that we're asking the right questions and required questions in the application. And then when it comes down to that time to complete, in those conversations that we're having with clients today, those analytics that we can grab on the back end through our technology is really helping drive those conversations when we look at things like the average time to complete an assessment, and where it makes sense to perhaps recalibrate based off of ROI studies, or what is really providing the most value in that process. So when we are having those conversations and kind of recalibrating with clients, one of the biggest things that's driving that is that time to complete. And although we don't offer, really the application side of things, I think Talent Reef Tim can probably speak a little bit more to this, but the assessment side of the house, we're certainly seeing quite a bit in the way of wanting to see what the average time to complete is, and maybe perhaps switching to a shorter assessment with our new product, or a shorter battery, if you will.
Yep, and this is Talent Reef Tim, to build on what Outmatch Tim and Cheryl just mentioned. When we think about some of the changes that companies need to make to adapt to this tight labor market, one of the big ones we think about is that both recruiters and hiring managers alike must really become recruitment marketers. And I know that's a term that we've been hearing in the industry now for a few years anyway. But really, it's no different when it comes to talent acquisition as we look at the consumer side of things, where promoting your corporate brand and marketing your products in a way that's differentiated and makes you easy to do business with. That's really the same kinds of things that we see on the talent attraction side and engagement side. Today's job seekers are really modernized consumers, especially as we think about the service industry and the hourly workers. Those applicants are also oftentimes your customers, and vice versa. So we've seen for a while that it's really important that you need to understand the behaviors of your modern applicant, and then really think like marketers to reach and engage them. And just a few examples that I think are meaningful. One is to personalize the experience. We know that millennials and Gen Z, they really like to be able to resonate with messaging and have that kind of personalized engagement. So adding things like employee spotlights, they could be videos or quick testimonials for employees that work at a specific location that applicant is applying to, that can have a meaningful impact on attracting applicants in the first place. And then highlighting content that today's applicants care about, especially those millennial and Gen Z folks, such as social responsibility and career development. Video is another area where it has become, as I think we all know, the number one form of content that is desired and consumed by today's applicants. So, looking at ways that you can incorporate video into any of your recruiting outreach, career pages, etc., is something really worth considering. And then, one of the things that we're really focused quite a bit on the Talent Reef side is offering, as many ways for applicants to connect in and apply and engage for career opportunities. And you really have to be visible just about everywhere today, including the traditional job boards and online channels, and then the newer ones that have emerged, such as Snapchat, QR codes, and text apply. So, these are some of the things that we think are really important. We, again, draw a comparison to the corporate marketing side when you're engaging and attracting customers. And the Talent Reef platform, just a real quick plug here, allows for this kind of packaging of your content to attract applicants and then to be able to reach them across all of these channels within a very unique social recruiting platform that combines both a content management system and a CRM system.
Yeah, and I never thought we would ever use
go ahead.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I never thought we would use Snapchat for applications, and it's so interesting to see kind of an uptick and non-traditional mediums for applications.
Yeah, and I think
thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on to the next the next question here for time's sake. But yeah, just to kind of summarize it a little bit, content is king, and being a marketer, I know that content drives leads, but candidates are similar to leads. You can kind of compare those funnels in the same way. And video content, super important. The different ways that you're going about, going after, certain candidates, and the different channels and things like that, super, super important. Going back to what Tim said, or Outmatch Tim said, that, even the technology that you're using. So, Outmatch has come out with a new assessment to kind of improve the candidate experience with images and things like that. So, with that being said, I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. And Cheryl, I'm gonna direct this question to you here. What are some common misconceptions about candidate engagement?
Perfect. Thank you for that. And one of the things that I commonly hear, especially when I did work in an internal role, is that a candidate will complete all processes and go through a painful process if they really want the job. So that conception or that thought around, even if we know it's kind of a bad process or it's kind of a long process, it really doesn't matter because the candidate will do it anyway. And we're just seeing that that's just not the case anymore, especially in that tight labor market that we just talked about. Really, if the process hasn't been updated in a few years and, it's kind of cumbersome, we see that, candidates who are under 30 do have a 30% higher drop-off rate than candidates who are over 40. So that is something that we know that is shifting in general for all demographics, but especially for those younger generations that we're all thinking about, not just millennials. We have that Generation Z coming up right behind them. So really, when we think about candidates' journey, and we talked a lot about this in the first section, but that hiring process is really expected to be faster, personalized, contain video content, and of course, mobile optimized. So with the tight labor market, we really want them to be engaged, but they also have that luxury of abandoning the process if it's not a good experience. Just like that consumer model that Talent Tip talked about, the luxury of being able to kind of jump in and out of an application because there are so many options out there is just where we're seeing some changes and shifts. So if candidates are engaged and they feel like that the employer has really taken the time, or potential employer has taken the time to think about how long it takes to complete, or their experience as a whole, we'll find that they're more engaged throughout the entire process, and you'll have more people at that top of the funnel. And Outmatch, Tim, I didn't know if you wanted to include or add anything here, but really when, we're seeing some candidates that don't feel like the assessment is engaging or job relevant, they may drop off here. And that's where, we're really taking a closer look at all steps in the process, but really where we're finding a lot of impact is not just looking at time to complete, but the overall experience. The way that they interact with the brand, the way that they interact with the assessments, and making sure that the entire process seems job relevant.
Yeah, absolutely, Cheryl. And, I, as the Chief Product Officer, take a lot of pride in communicating and interacting with our VIP customers, both on the pre-sales and post-sales side of things. And, as I looked at this question, an immediate anecdote that came up was we have a very large retail customer, and one of their biggest requirements was that kind of streamlined process to get the applicant through the system, because if they didn't get hired within, they said, 4 hours, that applicant would go across the street and work at a competitor, and that literally was happening to them in a lot of their markets. So I think that's a really key point. And I would kind of go up a little higher level as I think of this question, and just think about the strategic view view that I think we all need to be taking as it relates to the different positions that we're trying to fill in different locations. There certainly can be, different requirements and different strategies for each of them. So, whether it's tailoring some of the pre-screening, based on volume versus, quality that you might be receiving, or you might have new store openings where you might have a little bit of a different strategy that you deploy for that need, et cetera. And then really leveraging any recruitment and assessment metrics that you have to help you kind of shape some of those decisions.
And so, Charles, jumping back in here. So, Cheryl, I actually got a question from the audience for you. Are people under 30 moving way too fast?
I don't think that they're moving too fast. I think it's absolutely a reflection of the way that the world is moving. We have a 24/7 news cycle, and certainly we're all moving pretty quickly in general. But the expectation, as Talent Reef Tim talked about, the way that we shop has changed, the way that we go to market from a client perspective has changed, and the way that our applicants has changed. We're just with that internet age expecting things to happen fast and quick, because if I go to Amazon and I don't have my box shipped to me in 2 days, it's going to be 4 days. It's like, oh my goodness, what's taking so long? And I think that's just a shift in the way the world has shifted, in the way that we have shifted as consumers. And it's a natural progression for that to trickle down into a candidate or applicant feel. So it's not just under 30. I think it's across the board, but more so for those who have lived in this digital age their entire life.
Right. So it's about kind of constructing, changing as the times change, constructing and engineering, a quick and simple process, and, that can help with some of those things. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next question here. And Outmatch, Tim, I'm going to have you kind of lead this one, but we all know that some drop off is a good thing, but what ideal drop off rate should talent acquisition teams be aiming for?
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. So really tying into what Talent Reef Tim and Cheryl were talking about earlier, right? So drop off can be a scary term for if you're in talent acquisition. Especially, with the current challenge when you have a limited pool of candidates to really choose from. And as part of your recruitment metrics, right, there's many, time to fill, quantity of hire, SBA percentage, offer acceptance rate, and, I can list a whole bunch. Application drop-off rate is a really good indicator of what candidate experience is like, right? So I read this recently, this quote, the best candidates know they're the best and will not put up with a bloated application. My take on it is it's not necessarily segmented to best candidates. I think applicants throughout probably won't put up with a bloated application. So research shows that at Fortune 500 firms, I think this is applicable to organizations across, of all those who dropped off, 9 out of 10 dropped off because they encountered a frustrating application process. So I think it's obvious, but it's very telling, right? That's really the experience in the application is really driving drop off. So it's very simple. It's really about making that application process simple. From Outmatch's perspective, our assessments are integrated with applicant tracking systems, and that's really key for us as far as that candidate experience, right? We've partnered with a lot of top applicant tracking systems to build out an API where the assessment is either auto-launched right after the application is complete, so it's a seamless process from a candidate's perspective, or it's triggered by a status flow change, as the candidate moves into a certain step of the process. So once again, looking at it from a candidate's perspective, it's all seamless. It's all part of the application process. comes down to that time to complete of that whole application process. So especially when I work with clients, one of the big things that we talk about is, from an assessment perspective, is, hey, how long is it taking an average time to complete for candidates across the board? What does drop-off look like? So this is something that our clients have easy access to in our analytics tab within the tool itself. And typically we look and make sure that assessment drop-off rate is below 10%. So anything below 10%, we won't worry too much about it. But if it's going above that, that's something that we'll closely look at.
Thanks, Tim. So you're kind of talking about, the best candidates know that they're the best. That could really, not having a seamless application process could affect that top tier of talent tremendously. And so, most of them are dropping off because of the frustrating application. And so, getting that really seamless process, if you're using an application or an assessment, just really shortening that time to complete. So, Cheryl, I know you had some thoughts on this too. Could you add some color around this?
Yeah, and I do think that the ideal drop-off rates are going to vary on industry and role. We all want as many candidates at the top of the funnel and throughout the process as possible. I can't tell you how many times I was asked from hiring managers in my recruiting days of, hey, you only gave me 3 candidates. I really like 5. So we're always going to be competing for the most candidates in general. But when getting back to the heart of this question, and thinking about, there is some good drop-off rates, and that's the good part of that is you're doing a solid job of providing the candidate experience and perspective of what it is like to work there, and really more of those branding pieces that Talent Brief Tim was talking about. That will give the candidate quite a bit of opportunity to interact and make decisions if they're a good fit for your organization before they even go through the process, at least before the interview process. So the application certainly does tell us a lot about some bad experiences in the drop-off, but even if the candidate has more time to spend on the website and through those candidate career pages, through video or some of the other branding components that we talked about, that might give your candidates a chance to really get a better feel of what it would be like to work there. And if it's not a good match, or they don't really want to work in a place that has a ping pong table and a slide, that's a good way for them to self-select out of the process beforehand, before you invest too much time.
Cool. So basically, good drop-off rate would be kind of some of the people that, necessarily aren't, a perfect fit for your company, or they're, maybe just, casting a wide net for jobs, and that maybe that's not the right one for them. And then later realizing that it's not the right one, so they don't continue in the process. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on to our 4th question of the day. And Outmatch Tim, I'm also going to throw this one to you. I know you have some experience here, but if you see that drop-off rate is high, what is the first thing that you can do to kind of take action?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. So, tying in back to our previous conversation from the previous question, right? So there's from an assessment perspective, when I work with clients, it's first of all, it's key to be making sure to consistently monitoring so that you're able to catch any upward trends very quickly, right? When we talk about drop off. So I think that's really the first thing that you should continuously be, make sure that you're doing or build into your process. So even from an application perspective, right? So being able to be proactive rather than reactionary. And once you do identify that drop off is pretty high, once again, talking from a general sense, there could be multiple things that affect that. The obvious thing is the time to complete. So what are some simple things that you can do to really shorten that process? So is it, going back to some of the questions that I asked earlier and we've talked about is, what are some of the things that you can take out? Talent Brief Tim mentioned something that was very key is Sometimes one size doesn't fit all. Depending on where you're getting your applicants from, you might have to tweak around your application process to where it's actually feasible for you, right? So from a assessment perspective, what we always ask is, hey, did anything change from the application process? Did you add questions? Because a lot of times when you think about an application, you're thinking of, okay, I need to gather all these things from a candidate, and sometimes we miss the point of what is that experience? What is perception looking like, right? So keep in mind, as a candidate goes through the application process, you're also contributing to their perception about your brand, right? What it is like to work at this organization. So you want to be able to positively impact that. So from an assessment perspective, this is something that we always show up front. You know, when you're adding an assessment, depending on the type of assessment, the longer it is, the more likelihood that the drop-off increases. So when it comes to, say, hourly assessments, especially with our visual assessments, we're looking at about an average time of five minutes to complete, which is really good and really positively impacts that drop-off rate. So I think the first thing to do, back to the question, is really looking at the simple things you can do to be able to change and impact drop-off.
And Tim, I got a quick question here from the audience too, on that same note. So they asked, you know, if their application comes in, they look strong, you know, is it okay to skip that first phone screen and bring them in, in person right away?
So that's a good question, right? So it's always key to be able to be very efficient in your process. Obviously, you know, if I would look at it on a case by case basis, right? However, when you have one-offs in your process, so I come from a project management perspective, so in my head that question always brings up a red flag because we're going out of process and you have too many one-offs. So that's the perspective I'm going to answer from. It's always good in order to be efficient and productive to stick with your process that you have so that you don't have one-offs. However, if there are exceptions, I would absolutely say yes.
Okay, perfect. And Cheryl, I know you have some experience with, data and analytics and, using feedback and surveys to understand. Can you kind of talk about those things for us?
And I think it does come down to a lot of what Tim was talking about, of digging into the analysis from the data. And if you don't have access, or your vendor just can't provide the data that you're looking for any reason, one of the best places to get more information if you suspect you have high drop-off rates is really from those candidate experience or applicant surveys. We know from surveys, if someone's experience is really positive, they're more likely to give feedback, and the inverse is also true. So if they have a really poor experience, they're very likely to provide that feedback as well. So if you aren't already leveraging applicant or candidate experience surveys, that's something I definitely recommend that goes into your process. And there's a lot of vendors out there that provide this kind of service, so that's where you can really gather some additional data. So really the whole point I'm trying to make here is that it's easy to kind of go off of your gut. Oh, I think it might be the assessment, or I might think it might be the application, or it could be our 7 interviews that happen throughout our selection life cycle. But really that candidate experience is, I want to go back to what the candidates are actually saying, rather than kind of basing it off of intuition or gut. I'm definitely more of a data person. So when I see employers and other clients engaging with candidates and gathering feedback in that manner, that certainly can inform that decision of what might be happening with that drop-off rate.
Thanks, Cheryl. So just to summarize, like Tim was mentioning, really catch those trends early and use data. And Cheryl mentioned that as well. Look at your process, and did you add questions to the process? What changed from your initial process? Make sure that you're tracking those things and be proactive. And then going on what Cheryl said, make sure that you're utilizing things like surveys and getting feedback on the application and the interview and things like that. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next question here. And Cheryl, this one is going to be directed at you. What is the most important factor in candidate retention? Cheryl, I think you might be muted here.
I was, classic webinar move, right? So I'm mute. So for the most important factor for candidate engagement and retention is a lot of what Talent Reef Tim talked about, and it's that personalization and throughout the process. And I might actually pitch it over to him if he wants to kind of expand on what he said a little bit earlier. But really the best thing that we can do in the candidate engagement and retention really goes back to that consumer model. We visit websites, and regardless if it's an application or a career page or a place that we're trying to buy Christmas gifts or think about other things that we're doing as consumers, those websites remember who we are, why we were there last time, and the best ones sometimes even serve up the reason why we might be there this time. So having that kind of consumer recruitment marketing model into the talent acquisition process can increase that personalization and that feel that people are expecting whenever they go to any website. And that's not really just in interacting with brands, but it's also interacting with career pages on those brands. The lines are definitely blurred between consumer and candidate these days, and I think that's going to be a trend that moves forward. So when you have that personalization, and one of the most important factors in that is making sure that they feel like not only that you care, but that you have the kind of technology that is modernized, not just for the consumer, but modernized for that candidate.
Yeah, Cheryl, I mean,
Tim, go ahead.
Well, yeah, absolutely right on. Couldn't agree more. And I really love the framing of this question to include both engagement and retention. Those are literally two words that our organization focuses on obsessively, if that's such a word, in terms of delivering technology, to our customers. So as I look on the kind of the candidate engagement and attraction side, we all know that mobile devices are the preferred mechanism for individuals to be connecting in on. So we think about things like using SMS text communications as a way to engage candidates during the process. I mean, it's something that they've become to expect, certainly on the consumer side, as Cheryl mentioned, and it's something that is very effective, knowing that the open rates for SMS text are in the 80 to 90% rate versus traditional email. In the hourly space, sometimes your applicants don't even have email, but those open rates are considerably lower, certainly less than 10%. And then really letting applicants know that you're interested in a long-term relationship. I think as we on this call are really focused on that hourly segment, which is Talent Reef's only focus. We think about that long-term relationship, knowing that your applicants and employees are also potentially consumers. So you want to make sure that you're not ever viewing their application as a transaction. So in addition to the SMS text communications that you can be doing throughout the interview process and applicant process, we actually offer two things that you'd find interesting. One is applicant pools, which allows an applicant that doesn't get hired for a particular location to then become visible to hiring managers at surrounding store locations, right? So it's really maximizing the exposure for that applicant to different opportunities. And then we have Talent Community, which this kind of functionality has been around for quite some time, but here's where applicants can connect in and then essentially opt in to receive career updates beyond just this one that they've applied to. So on the front end of the recruiting side of things, these are some things that we see are very effective in connecting in with applicants and really helping to support your brand. And then just real quickly here, to us, retention is equally important as recruiting. And I'm going to just quickly cover retention from an employee retention standpoint, I like to say sometimes, the best hire you'll ever make is the one that you don't have to, because that employee is a thriving employee. So the parallel to customer marketing, in this case, I'm talking more about driving retention and loyalty, also holds true on the employee side of things. So the reality is annual reviews just don't cut it anymore as the singular way to engage your employees, especially when we think about the composition of a workforce in the hourly space, where you have a highly blended workforce between full-time, part-time, seasonal, and gig-type workers. So that's highly complex to manage. In those annual reviews, just really don't cut that. So just like today's applicant, employees expect regular communications, and they want to connect based on their preferences. As I mentioned, text being predominant preferred method. And the employee today wants to feel connected to the business goals at the store level, all the way up to regional and corporate, and they seek to receive frequent feedback and recognition. I like to call the millennials and Gen Z kind of the trophy generation. So, making sure that you're recognizing performance and sending badges to those employees really can help them feel a sense of connectivity into your brand. And then furthermore, we mentioned a little bit earlier that they want insights into career development opportunities, including training. So in the case of Talent Reef, we focus both on candidate engagement and retention. The Talent Reef platform consists of a talent management module. It's our post-hire module, and we combine goals-based evaluations that help connect those employees into the goals of the business. Training, so the employees can sign up for training and we can recommend training that they should take. And then really what's most new is employee engagement, which includes features like ongoing communications, continuous feedback and recognition, as well as pulse surveys. And we really believe you need to take this holistic approach to talent management to really drive a high-performing, loyal, and high-retention workforce.
Thanks, Tim. So really, just summarizing what the both of you said there, it really comes down to, making, on the front end and all the way through the process, it's, kind of about how, making sure that the applicant or the employee feels like you care, and really connecting with those people in the right ways, like you mentioned, through mobile and things like that, and then really engaging employees over time. And you mentioned a number of tools out there that you can do that with, whether with Talent Reef, and we've got a Outmatch culture and engagement tool as well. So there's a number of things that you can do there from a technology standpoint as well. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on to the next question here. What outcomes can you expect from improving candidate experience? Outmatch Tim, I will send this your way, and then Cheryl and Talent Reef Tim, go ahead and provide some color on that.
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing a theme in our conversations here. So, with regard to your brand and candidate experience, it's hard to quantify it, right? So this is a pretty huge impact area. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. So influencing perception experience of the candidate as they go through the candidate experience. Not only does it affect them directly, so think about how it affects their network of peers, right? So what are they saying about the application process to their family, their friends, their network of peers, as far as, hey, the process was easy, it was short, or was it long? So that's also something to think about, how that impact can be reached. So among some best practices that you can follow, one thing that's simple to do is for a better candidate experience is setting very clear and simple expectations up front. think about, any sort of process, not just an application process, anything that you're putting your foot into, when those clear expectations that experience more than likely will be a good one, as opposed to, when it is a 20-minute application process as a candidate you're going through, and you're thinking, okay, it's almost going to be done, but then it's not, and then it adds to that negative experience. When up front you say, hey, the messaging is very clear. Hey, this is how long it's going to take. This is how much you can expect. So I think the outcomes of focusing on that is huge. Also, we talked about visual assessments, making it fun for the candidate. Even how can you do that through the application process? So the assessments, I think we've focused on that with moving to visual assessments. Talent Reef, Tim, you had mentioned earlier, which I thought was really cool, being able to engage the candidate through video, right? One of the tools that we have is a video interviewing tool that really changes it up on the candidate, makes it interactive, makes it more engaged, and they're seeing a live person, right? So I think there's many ways that you can really impact the candidate perception. And then I pointed out a stat earlier how a lot of candidates gather their perception about the job from the interview. You can affect and impact that right up front before they even come to the interview. So it kind of flows throughout the process.
And Cheryl, I know you had some ideas here as well. Can you provide some color on that?
You bet. So when you're thinking about more of that consumer model as well, we talk a lot about it from a sales perspective about that net promoter score. So that's something kind of like a framework that I encourage clients and really people that I interact with when you're thinking about candidate experience. Yes, it is a little bit harder to quantify, but people talk. People tell their networks, and either through those face-to-face interactions, but more importantly through social media. So when they have a good experience, people are likely to share that, not only on Glassdoor, but maybe even LinkedIn, maybe even some of the other non-traditional mediums like Snapchat. And when you think about some of those more negative experiences, it's definitely detrimental to a brand when candidates have poor experiences. And you better believe that they're going to possibly blast that experience through those same social media. So even though that there aren't dollars being spent or hard and fast money being measured here, that net promoter score and possibly the downside or those downstream effects of negative experiences can certainly damage a reputation of a brand or company, or even maybe a talent acquisition team within a smaller business.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Tim, you mentioned perception, and it can help improve the candidate's perception, but also as a customer. So thought that was really interesting. And net promoter score. And Cheryl, I actually have another question from the audience on net promoter score, and maybe you already touched on this, but mentioned Glassdoor as the net promoter score, kind of, and a reflection of the brand. How can you? What kinds of things can you do to improve that? And maybe even Talent Reef, Tim, you might have some insights on improving your Glassdoor reviews and things like that.
Tim, did you want to jump in there, or you want me to go?
Oh, sure. Go right ahead, and I can add a couple things as well.
Sure. So when thinking about improving Glassdoor pages, you don't want to, you can't really artificially improve those, nor would you want to. I think that if you are seeing some of those trends and a downward trend in ratings or comments, it's really kind of a big red flag and signal to go to the start of the application, really spend some time evaluating that process. And when you see higher ratings, you know that there's probably some partnership you can work with Glassdoor, and from my internal experience using our Glassdoor rep to kind of quantify that information into higher ratings equals higher engaged candidates and better hires overall. And that's something that, depending on your relationship with Glassdoor or relationship with companies like Glassdoor, it's certainly something that you want to partner with them on. But in general, that is something that when you're seeing negative or positive, it really does give you an indication of where to start and where to put your effort.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Cheryl, and Outmatch Tim. The only 2 cents, Charles, I would add to this really, and I really love that you brought up the kind of NPS score, Net Promoter Score, and Cheryl, the way you related that to Glassdoor. That's really interesting. I hadn't heard of that before. That analogy, so that makes a lot of sense. I look at what we're doing on the talent side. We're capturing the employee Net Promoter Score, so eNPS, to really kind of gauge their loyalty and connectivity by asking a simple question: how likely are you to refer a friend to your company from a scale of 1 to 10? And that's really interesting data, but we are beginning to look at, and also, Outmatch, same thing, looking at ways to really kind of track the candidate and employee's journey, right, from very first touch point all the way through to exit. And I think we can do that through things like surveys. And to me, the holy grail eventually will become the kind of data analytics play as you think about collecting all of that pre-hire data, all of that assessment data, post-hire performance data. You can really begin to see, where best applicants are coming from, how they view that applicant experience, et cetera, and begin to really further fine-tune things. So I think there's a real exciting, next frontier around kind of the data side of things, which I see both Talent Reef and Outmatch really providing all the key metrics and data points that will enable that.
Thanks. Cheryl, I have another question from the audience. Can you just quick define what Net Promoter Score is?
Sure. So Net Promoter Score is that indicator or kind of an index number that you can see that a candidate or even an employee is more likely to share their experiences with their network.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to our last question. And Cheryl, I'm going to give you about a minute here to answer this one. How do you ensure your hiring process is supporting D&I? And again, we'll take about a minute on this one, then we'll move on to questions from the audience.
Sure, 1 whole minute. So I'll just hit the highlights here. What we're seeing from a mobile perspective. There are certain demographics, and especially when you think about hourly workforce, they're going to use and want to apply on their mobile device. So one of the things that can really undermine those diversity inclusion efforts are not having your steps in the process be mobile optimized, whether it's the application or the assessment, some of those SMS text capabilities that Tim talked about. And really, we're seeing a huge mobile increase across all demographics, but women and African American candidates are definitely more likely to apply or take an assessment via mobile device. So if women are 6% more likely to complete on mobile and African Americans are 12% more likely to complete on a mobile device, if you're not in those spaces and on mobile, you're missing a talent pool completely. So making sure that you're not only just digital, but mobile optimized can certainly help with that diversity and inclusion component.
Thanks, Cheryl. So if you guys have more questions on diversity and inclusion, we can totally talk to you about that. For time's sake, we are going to move on to the Q&A section as we only have about 4 minutes left, and then it will cut us off on the hour. So please reach out to us if you need anything else on D&I. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here. And so the first one here is, and again, everybody go ahead and use this opportunity to get your questions in. But the first one is, what does applicant flow mean? So I'll go ahead and throw this to the three of you, and then maybe you can just kind of talk about what that process looks like.
Yeah, this is Outmatch Tim and Talent Reef Tim. I think you'll have some good insight around this. So, applicant flow is when I think about workflow, and I think this is what the question is relating to, is just the progression of an applicant from point A to one they finish. So all the different components that they go through within the application. So from when they, click apply to when they click submit. That's my perspective.
Yeah, and Outmatch, Tim, that's right. And, we would just add a little bit of the kind of the top of the funnel description. You think of the marketing funnel, these are all the leads, right? So applicants are like leads, and applicant flow is a measure of, the number of applicants you're getting, what sources are they coming from, what locations are they applying to, et cetera, and then kind of the process following from that, moving down the funnel and just having all those kind of metrics to see, what kind of quantity and quality of applicants you're getting.
Thank you. Give me one moment to pull up the next question here. Okay, what is the best way to get buy-in for investments in employer brand and candidate engagement? And I'll throw this one to the three of you again. We've got about a minute. Actually, we actually are out of time. So I'm actually going to skip this question. If you do have a question, please feel free to send it to me at csummers@outmatch.com. I'm going to move on to our last slide here. And I want to first just take the opportunity to thank our panel, Tim from Outmatch, Tim from Talent Reef, and Cheryl from Outmatch. Your insights are, really, really helpful. I hope that everybody in the audience today found those insights really, really helpful. So thank you all for attending today's panel discussion on managing company culture and leveraging culture as a competitive advantage. Our next webinar is all about learning agility, how to identify learning agility in candidates and employees, and develop an agile learning mindset across your workforce. Hope to see you all again next month. We do have a free leadership workshop here in December in our Outmatch office. If you are interested in that and getting more detail on that, we have a page on our website for that. But if you want to get some more detail, I can totally reach out to me and I can give you some information on that. So. And again, we have a live reveal of our new assessment on Friday, so that that link is in your status window. Otherwise, an email will go out tomorrow, and you'll get that link to that demo webinar style reveal of our new assessment. So hope to see you all again next month. Appreciate you coming out. Thanks.